there's this moment when you finally reach a level that you've used to dream about. You've got the title, the control, you've got the seat at the table. And now people see you as this leader, whether that was intentional or not. But people are looking to you for direction. And here's the thing that no one warns you about. And that's the higher you climb, the fewer people there are sitting next to you. And even worse, the people that are sitting next to you, you don't trust and you have no connections with. And then you start to have these conversations with yourself, the conversations around making decisions, because it becomes harder and harder for you to talk to people who are not dealing with similar situations. And you enjoy being the boss, but you also enjoy being invited out for lunch and for happy hour. And then you remember that there's this old saying that can never be more true than right at this moment. And that's, it gets lonely at the top. Welcome to In My Business, the show where I keep it real about launching and growing a business while juggling family, relationships, community, and everything else in between. I want to pull back the curtain and try to make the chaos make sense. I'm your host, Dr. Tiffany Allen Smith. I'm a business owner, I'm a veteran, a wife, a mom, and a proud member of the I Had to Figure It Out the Hard Way Club. This show is for anyone standing at the edge of entrepreneurship asking, can I really do this? I'm here to tell you, yes, you can. But let's talk about it first. In this episode, we're pulling back the curtain to something that is often invisible, but it's so very real. And that's the loneliness of leadership. I'll share a story from back when I was working at a company, and I'll never forget, just had this conversation with my supervisor and HR and some other folks around my title not fitting my actual role and how my skills weren't being effectively utilized. And that's the gist of it, but the organization was growing, and as the organization was growing, so were the needs of that organization. We're expanding. My conversation was promoting me and switching my title and my leadership structure so that I can report to an entirely different department. At the end of that conversation, they made some changes, all right. And the changes were, I was no longer a part of that team. I was going to now be managing that team. And I remember after that, I walked to my desk and I just sat there in silence. There wasn't a big announcement. There was no team huddle, no happy hour celebration. It was just me. And while I was proud, so proud that I had accomplished this thing, I also felt a strange emptiness. I wouldn't say it was sadness exactly. It was the realization that my role had shifted and I was the team's leader. And for me, that changed everything. So as you can imagine, I became responsible for different things. So my goals were different. I went from only focusing on certain areas of the work back when I was doing my previous role, was only focused on these certain things. And I went from that to being focused on all of the areas that impacted my team. So this meant that I had to now become familiar with everyone's role, not just my new one, everyone's that was underneath my leadership. And I spent less time socializing with my teammates and more time in meetings and more time making decisions. And then outside of work, I felt like, and this could have been my own insecurity at the time of being in this role, but I felt like my friends didn't quite understand what I was going through. And talking to them, it felt like I was boring them. I felt like I was just sharing another corporate story with them, and I really did feel like I was boring them. And there were other times where I felt like their advice was always so surface, or it was dismissive. You know, they would hit me with the cliche advice, it'll get better, or, you know, you're the right person for this. There was no depth to it. And I didn't feel like I could bounce ideas off of them. But after a while, I had to remind myself that I asked for this. I had actually asked for this. And while I liked the casualness that being a team member offered, that wasn't for me anymore. I had learned my role and I had became very good at it. And I'm not a big fan of monotony. Monotony is doing the same thing over and over and over again, like the same type of role, the same type of thing. That's not for me. I was bored. And I felt like I wasn't growing, and I definitely wasn't being challenged. So if you can relate to this, then maybe you've had many different instances like this as well, because I have. And all of them have ended up in a similar way. And this is yet another reason why I became an entrepreneur. I know this about myself, and I work well with the team, but I work better when I understand the full picture. I need to be, as they say in Hamilton, if you're a Hamilton fan, the play Hamilton, if you're a fan of that, then you'll appreciate this. I needed to be in the room where it happens. Or if you haven't seen Hamilton yet, which you totally should, I needed to have a seat at the table. One thing that I've learned about myself being an entrepreneur, and if you're one, you'll relate to this as well, is we can be obsessive. And when I say obsessive, it's not in the way where we need help. You know, it's not that. But it's more in a way of we see this vision so clearly that we're willing to give up Netflix and our social life for it. It's in that kind of way. We're committed, and we're passionately committed to bringing this vision to life. Oftentimes, that commitment, when that takes over, something happens. We start to make less time for the things that don't fit into that vision. So the planning, the building, the perfecting, it's all consuming. And there's somewhere in the middle of all of that, the middle of that hustle, that grind, our relationships start to thin out. Our friends stop calling us. We haven't called them back. We haven't sent them a text. We haven't done any check-ins. And then they stop checking in on us. Our families, they might start to feel a little distant because we're not being present. Or we have, our excuse is work. We're working on this thing, or we're doing this thing. And family starts to pull back a little bit. If you can also relate up until this point, then I'm sure you'll relate to this. We tell ourselves that it's just for now. Once we get this thing, whatever that thing is, off the ground, we'll make time again. We'll be present. We'll do all of this stuff. We just have to get to the next level on this thing. But by the time we look up, which is oftentimes much later, we realize that we haven't been the best friend. We haven't been the best spouse or family member. And that's not because we didn't care. That's not it at all. And it may come across that way. But it's because we were so busy holding up the weight of that dream. I'm going to take a short break to let you know how you can become a sponsor of this great show. I'll be right back. Hey, entrepreneurs. You know what fuels great content? Amazing coffee or tea. And you could be the hero behind my next caffeinated breakthrough. If you want to power this podcast while getting your brand highlighted to our awesome community, let's team up. Sponsor my coffee and tea habit, and you'll get a business highlight during the show and in my blogs for the week. It's advertising, but way more fun and personal. Because let's be honest, behind every great podcast episode is someone who believed in caffeine. And hopefully that someone could be you. Are you ready to fuel the show? Reach out by visiting my website at drtiffscommunity.com and clicking on that sponsor button. Let's brew up something amazing together. Here's the part that stings. Sometimes you have to say goodbye to certain relationships altogether. Not because there was this big blow up, but because they couldn't understand why you had to work. They couldn't understand why you just couldn't relax or take a break or take a long extended vacation. I'll say that they knew that you were building something. You were building this business, but they didn't understand that you weren't just building this business. You were building the foundation for your future. And you were tapping into that part of yourself that ignites you to act. And it's something that you actually enjoy. Yeah, it is work. Don't get me wrong, it's work. But if you're like me, it's an adrenaline rush. So speaking for myself, I am not what you would call an adrenaline junkie because I'm not attracted to propelling off of a cliff, jumping out of a plane, going on the scariest roller coasters. That's not my thing at all. Never has been. When I go out with people that they enjoy doing that, which is totally fine, I'm typically the one that'll be on the sidelines. I'll hold the phones, the bags. I'll take pictures, cheer you on. You know, you can do it. Look up at you from very high and, wave. I'm that person. But what I want you to understand is if we flip that perspective, not everyone is excited by doing the things that you're doing. Your adrenaline is coming from a different way. And maybe you still like doing all of that other stuff, that roller coasters and stuff. Maybe that is also another thing that you like doing. But this entrepreneurship, this hustle, this grind, this building and holding up the vision, this is also an adrenaline rush. It's not everyone's thing. So not everyone is going to understand that that's what you're doing. Some people do recognize that, but they are going to be off to the side, capturing the moments, taking the pictures, cheering you on. You have people that recognize that that's not their strength. And so they'll give you the support and the motivation from that perspective. Because not everyone understands the mental stimulation it brings to create and to solve problems. But you do. But you shouldn't expect everyone else to. And I do understand that losing those relationships hurts. I understand. I've been there so many times. They hurt in a different way from just normal loneliness. It's not that you're alone in the work. You're alone in the sacrifice. And this may not be true, but this is how you feel. There's not a polite way to tell your friends, I'm sorry my dream got in the way of our brunch. I mean, here's the thing. It's also important for you to be patient with other people. Just as you're adjusting, so are they. And in hindsight, I wish I would have had these conversations with my friends sooner. And if I could have had the conversation with them, it would have went something like this. I'm starting a new business, and you already know how I get just all consumed with figuring this thing out. So I want to let you know that if you ever feel like I'm being distant, please just let me know. And I want you to let me know because, unfortunately, I don't always realize when I'm being distant. I would have said something like that to them. And for my more intimate relationships, I would have said something like this. Please try to understand when I've worked myself into being so tired that I feel like I don't have the emotional or mental capacity because I'm just exhausted. I do want you to know that you have my word. I do my best to create boundaries between me and the work, but sometimes I will need to make that sacrifice. If you're asking for them to work with you, you're going to have to work with them too. And you're going to have to work with them by doing your best to remain present. Because after a while, being busy at work is no longer an acceptable reason for you to just continue to expect people to be patient with you. It's not. I'll be honest when I say this. I didn't realize this about myself until much later. I always struggled with finding the words behind something that I couldn't fully comprehend for myself. So if this resonates with you, then maybe it's time for you to start thinking of how to handle these conversations with your friends and definitely with your family. Because loneliness should not be the solution. Healthy relationships in its many different forms are so important for your mental health. I was just having this conversation with someone about the importance of connection and connecting with people and not just isolating yourself. I don't want you to stay isolated because of your tendency to get lost in the work. It's okay to come up for air and come up for connection. The work can wait sometimes. Here's what we know. We know that leadership is full of rewards. You can set the vision, you can make the impact, you can guide your business towards certain values. But we also know that it comes with fewer peers, less honest feedback, and higher emotional stakes. Because people are now looking to you for the answers. They're not looking to you for camaraderie. And sometimes that means that you can't share your doubts out loud. And you can't vent the same way you used to. You have to shift how you do a lot of these different things. And you have to be more conscious of who you're talking to in what you're saying to them, because things weigh differently. The stakes are heavier. When it comes to building your brand, building your business, that reflects you. Your brand reflects you. So if you're feeling isolated, that can creep into your messaging. That can get into the way of your creativity. That can make you feel insecure. When you're disconnected from people, then your brand can start to feel and sound disconnected too. Just keep that in mind. You definitely have to be intentional about finding genuine connection. Let's start there. Genuine connections are absolutely what you need. And they're not just going to come right to you all the time. You're going to have to, again, be intentional about finding them. And that's not just through networking, because you're going to network for the business, of course, and for opportunities, but you're also going to network for support, because you will need support from running your business. And sometimes you'll just be running on fumes, and that network that you're going to build is going to be the network that's going to help you to rebuild, re-engage, rebalance, and they're going to understand what you're doing, and they're going to pour into you. But remember, you're going to have to pour into them as well. It's not just about you and what you're building. I want to stress that. Okay. Here's some takeaways. I want you to build your own inner circle. And this is going to be a small group of just trusted peers. Get you a mentor. Ask people for mentorship. Don't be afraid to ask for that mentorship. People who you admire, who understand your level of responsibility. Find a place where you can really let out your thoughts without fear or judgment, and a space where you don't feel like people are going to undermine your leadership. You definitely don't want that, because your business is a part of you, but it's not all of you. So it's going to be very important for you to protect your sense of self outside of the business. You are the person behind your business, but you're not just that business. You have friendships, you have families, you have hobbies, things that you like as well. And it's so important for you to hold that as sacred. So let me sum all of this up. If I had to do it all over again, I'll do some things differently, but going back is not an option. I am moving forward, and I will say that having the seat at the table was worth it for me. It wasn't always warm. A lot of times it was cold. The table was not always full. It was empty so many times. But the truth is, leadership will cost you some relationships. But here's the thing. It shouldn't cost you all of them. You can build your own table, invite the right people to that table, and make sure your leadership journey doesn't become something that you're always and only doing by yourself. If this episode hit home for you, I'd love to hear your story. Send me a message or connect with me on social. I am on Meta and IG at Dr. Tiff's Community. Because even in leadership, we don't have to do this alone. And if you know another leader who might be feeling the weight of that lonely seat, then I want you to share this episode with them. Until next time, entrepreneurs, just remember, your seat matters, your voice matters, and your business depends on you showing up fully even when it's just you at the table. Thanks for being in my business. If this episode made you nod, think, or resonated with you in any way, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget, leave me a review, share some questions, and come back next week. We've got more to talk about.